Hello, everybody. Happy New Year, 2025. Brian, did you think you were going to live that long?
Uh, I probably thought when I was 15 that 2025 was, I don't know, something in a Zager and Evans song that I'll never see.
I remember in 1976, I was like 12, whatever. Um, the big deal, the bicentennial year. I wonder if we're going to do like a 250 year celebration next year, because that'll be right. That'll be 250 years our country will be born.
Yeah, I think
Is,
so.
is, yeah, that's crazy.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, happy New Year to everybody, and we are doing the Groomed in 10. Last week we talked about altar calls. I cleverly, I think cleverly, called the podcast. Go ahead and bow your heads, close your eyes, and shut your mouth. Uh, the idea that we don't want to slam on altar calls. That's not what we're doing, but um, the after effect, the manipulation that can happen, not always happens, but can happen after, the motive of the church to have an altar call,
Yeah.
right? My motive in responding to an altar call is I remember the first altar call that I ever responded to. It was a sacred moment to me. I didn't understand any of the church politics or any of the things that were going on behind the scenes. I just knew that I needed to make a change in my life. And what they were presenting at the time was that opportunity. And so I took it. And it was a sacred moment to me. What I didn't realize, and I did, was that there was a mechanism behind the scenes to harvest those names and harvest that experience that I had, and now begin to put me into a process and get me into a funnel system that contributed to the overall church goal, which was to raise leaders and produce more Christians, I
Yeah.
guess. So
Yeah. It's
what do you think,
interesting.
Brian?
Well, it's interesting because it wasn't a sacred moment to me. It was a very conscious decision. I talked about people close to me that I loved. My brother and my wife had begun to go to church, and I didn't want to lose those connections, and so it just seemed like the thing to do. And actually, my wife had given me a copy of Hal Lindsey's book, Late Great Planet Earth. Do not ever read that book. If you own that book, just throw it in the trash. Don't give it to Goodwill so anybody else can read it either, because it's worthy of your garbage can. But anyway, so there was a little, well, gosh, hell seems like a bad thing. I don't want to go there. I mean, I'm losing all my friends, so maybe I ought to join this club. So, yeah, it wasn't a sacred moment for me. I mean, it started me on a different path in my life where I was trying to figure out, who Jesus is and what that was all about. Because I never went to church growing up, but it wasn't like, in a sense, it was an inflection point in my life, but it wasn't like this deep religious experience.
So later on, obviously you're a Christian now and you have a deep faith in Christ. What was that process like for you then? If it wasn't an altar call, it wasn't a defining, come down to the altar, bow your head, close your eyes, lift your hands up, you know, all that. What was it?
I think it's like, think about you're standing in a field and the sun is behind you, right? And the sun is always there. And you turn around and you face it though, and you experience it a different way when the sun is shining in your face. I mean, I think that's what it was for me. I just began to be curious. It's like, okay, what is this thing all about? And who is this Jesus? And I mean, from the very beginning, we waded through it's like you got to spit out the bones and eat the meat, right? I mean, with anything. And it was a long process over time that I really began to have what I would describe as, a real encounter with true love, with perfect love, with Jesus. But it was a process, and it's a process that's still in process today.
Yeah, and I think that's important to say and important to bring out because the church makes a big deal about the altar calls, like that defining moment, that big ah,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's not always like that. sometimes those moments turn people off, right?
Yep.
It's those quiet moments where God's just talking to you. Now, if God's talking to you during an altar call, I'm not going to slam that, but it seems like there was a lot of, we were involved with Jeannie, which, it had to be the key of C, you had to have the organ going, and the environment at the end was really important. It was very, very
Yeah.
important to control that environment.
Yeah.
So the end, there was nobody talking. The music was playing, the mood was set. You lowered your voice to a lower octave, and it was, so it was it felt manufactured a lot
Yeah.
of the times. And again, I think God can use that, and maybe I'm not gonna, say that it was all bullshit, but some of it was, it was very manipulative. And but I think it's important to say that, because people do have those moments where God is talking to them.
Yeah.
And it can be an altar call. It can be, driving down the street in your car. I was just talking to my friend Steve the other day. Steve Hayes, we've had him on here, and he was talking about how he was listening to a Billy Joel song, and God was talking to him through the Billy Joel song,
Yeah.
And I think that's important,
Yeah.
that we relegate God to this box of,
Yeah.
this perfect environment where God is okay. He's like this pristine, almost like a superstar comes into the room when the environment is set up perfectly for him, and then this moment happens, right?
Yeah.
And that seems so fake and phony and weird to me. And it's counter Jesus, because Jesus showed up when
Right.
people were going to get water at the well, and going to do, doing things in life, eating fish and having bread, and
Getting drunk at the party, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it's
turn
funny.
water into wine.
It's funny because we have this idea that, there's this, when you seal the deal, with saying the sinner's prayer, that all of a sudden this like opens the door to this divine activity in your life. Like God couldn't come near you until you did that. Now all of a sudden the floodgates are open, which is just, I mean,
Right.
it's ridiculous because, again, if you just go back and you read the Gospels and you looked at the places, you made this point, the places Jesus went, and you looked at the people he hung around with, if you can do that and still say, yeah, God can't stand to be around all you dirty, rotten people who haven't prayed the prayer yet, then, I mean, you're not, I don't know, you're practicing some kind of self-deception there. I'll just say it that way.
Right. And he went where the prostitutes were.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that today.
Yeah.
Like, if he was going where the prostitutes are, it's not a fun, like, I grew up in South Boston, and we had those places,
Yeah.
and they're tough places.
Yeah.
And there are pimps around protecting those girls and pushing those girls out. It's a dangerous environment, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And so Jesus was there. He was in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't as pristine. Oh, here's a prostitute walking in the middle of the, I don't know, the mall, whatever.
Right.
I mean, you know what I mean? We
Right.
make it sound so like they just stumbled upon these people. No, he was in their environment.
Yeah.
And and they still had an encounter with
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I think that, when I went through my whole transition in my faith, call it deconstruction, call it whatever. We talked about this on the phone the other day. We'll do a podcast on this, but I have a hard time sometimes calling myself a Christian, not because of Jesus, but because of what, people attach to that word, all the crazy stuff, right? Because I don't want any part of that. But I look back at my experience, and I was going to say, one of the things I really appreciate about the Gospels was just that. The reason I didn't throw it all out is I began to look at those stories and think, like, man, this guy hung out with the same kind of people I hung out with when I was in high school.
Yeah.
It's like, he walked into the world. He was a real boy in a real world, and
Right. You put most Christians in an environment like that now, they wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
They really wouldn't know what to do.
Nope.
Like some of the stuff that I hear on a daily, in schools, when kids are telling me their crazy stories, I just picture some of the pristine Christians that I know standing there in front of them. They would just be horrified. They wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Jesus knew what to do. Well, he knew what to do, and that's why he was there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the coolest experiences I've had is Cheryl and I were helping with this street ministry in kind of South Central Omaha for a while, and they're basically just feeding people and giving them a place to hang out. It ended up that the lady ran it was like hyper crazy. We got fired because we didn't believe like she did, but we got a chance to hang around with some really cool people, and some of them had mental issues. And I remember one guy came to me one day, and he was really proud of himself because he came. He says, "Yeah," he says, he said, I've really cut down on watching porn, and I'm not drinking hard liquor anymore. I'm just drinking beer." And it wasn't the fact that he had made those decisions. I just thought it was funny because he thought that was meaningful to God, right? And I gave him a that gave me an opportunity to say, you know what, that's cool if that's what you want to do, but the love of God is there for you no matter what you do.
Yeah.
And I mean that's a memory I have that I'll cherish forever.
Well, Brian, Happy New Year. And we have Eileen Fires Delahanty coming up this week.
All
Kind of
right.
excited about that. She's going to be talking about trauma uh, and church trauma specifically, and a little, maybe just some general ways to deal with trauma and that kind of stuff. So looking forward to that. You guys have a great week. God bless.
Yep. See y'all. Happy New Year.